Hello, everyone. Welcome to Uncomplication. I have a treat for you today. I got to spend some time getting to know Benjamin Cowen from Into the Cryptoverse, one of my favorite crypto YouTubers. And in this episode, I interview Ben. We talk about the market, we talk about Bitcoin cycles, we talk about the YouTube sphere and its influence on us, regulation, and even galaxies beyond galaxies. So stick around, you won't want to miss it. And thanks for tuning in. Cheers. Thank you so much for, taking a little bit of time to talk to me. Like I was saying up front, you're one of my favorite crypto YouTubers and you're starkly different from a lot of the other voices out there. I feel like when I'm listening to you, I'm listening to a real technician and a real analyst. You have you got your degree in mathematics and physics while you were a research assistant at NASA, and
Yeah.
you have a PhD in nuclear engineering. I'm really curious with that kind of pedigree, what was kind of the moment that got you into crypto?
For me, getting into crypto was not the first time I bought Bitcoin. It was the first time I learned about it, and that was back in uh, 2011. And I did my math undergrad. So I took this cryptography course, and we had, tons of different projects and whatnot. And we didn't actually talk about Bitcoin in the class. Like, we didn't talk about Bitcoin, but we talked about cryptography, and that was enough for me to ultimately learn about Bitcoin. Now, unfortunately, I was a very poor college kid, and I didn't have any money to put into crypto. I mean, I didn't have any money. I was just sort of, going on off student loans and whatnot. And so I learned about it back in 2011, and I really liked the idea. And it was a couple years after that I really started to really look more,
Hmm.
really dive into it. And then in the last cycle, I was able to handle it a little bit better than I did before. So when I say the last cycle, I mean going up to like 2017, 2018 peak. And I was able to sort of like handle it a little bit better. And we came crashing back down like we always do. Um, and from there, I just decided, okay, well, I want to start a YouTube channel and try to show people that maybe there's a little bit of method to the madness, but also encourage people that, hey, we cannot predict short-term moves in this market, because I've been here forever, and I mean, maybe some people can. I shouldn't discount everyone, but I know I can't. Um, so that was sort of what got me into it. It was just cryptography class back in undergrad, and then getting into it myself, and then ultimately wanting to help other people understand it. Because again, there's a very common misconception
Hmm.
around crypto, about what it is and who uses it. There's a huge misconception, and also I think the volatility scares people off as well. But if you just show a few nice charts, you can really get people to understand that, hey, we just go through these boom and bust
Hmm.
cycles, and if you just stick with it for a few years, it's hard to not do well, as long as you're not FOMOing into all the micro caps that are shilled everywhere.
So I'm curious, when you were in that market in 2017, 2018, on the way up, did you believe the narrative? Did you believe that it was going to the moon? And
No,
or
I
were
mean,
you
I
surprised when it came crashing back down?
no, because I saw what happened in 2013 firsthand, and I also saw what happened in 2011, even though I wasn't like invested. Like, I saw what happened, right? And then in 2013, I saw it firsthand. There is
Hmm.
even a fellow grad student, because when I was in grad school, one of the other guys there was interested in Bitcoin, and I remember he woke up one morning, and we were sort of like we talked about it and stuff, but it wasn't like this thing that we thought was gonna like change our life or anything. Um, and I remember he said he woke up one morning and he made like $70,000, and we were like, whoa, what happened? What happened with Bitcoin? Um, and I remember him saying it was like the happiest day of his life, and
Hmm.
and I think that was sort of realizing, because not long after that we watched it come back down. We watched it come back down. So yeah, I mean, in 2017, did I know that 20K was the peak? No, right? I didn't know that. I mean, it could have gone to 25K. It could have stopped at 15K. Um, but you always sort of know that after a crazy move, you're gonna see a massive pullback at some point. It's just always hard to know what phase you're at, right?
Hmm.
It's hard to know if you're at like, the first sell off, if you're at like the final peak. Um, and then that's why I worked on just trying to develop tools to help me navigate that. And that's sort of like the manifestation of that is in the YouTube channel.
When you get people that are coming to you, your channel, and they're new to this market, what do you find their perception is, and as far as like how to invest, when to invest, what they're coming to you for, and then what are you trying to actually instill in them in terms of like education of how this moves?
Yeah, I think managing your risk is the most important thing. Most people enter crypto when it's in a bubble, right? Because that's what makes the headlines, right? That's what everyone, you see the headlines. I even saw my YouTube channel, I mean, it took me 6 months to go from 0 subscribers to 500. It took me 6 months. And and then, it also there was a month or two last year, and the same thing happened on your YouTube channel where you gain 100,000 or 200,000 YouTube subscribers like that, right? Just instantly you gain them all, which was crazy for you because you literally started and then it just shot up, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, you deserve that because you help show people, hey guys, what if it's going to play out differently than some people are saying, and so a lot of people come in at a bubble at like at a local top. Sometimes it's not a market cycle peak, sometimes it's just like a local top before you have some major pullback for a while. And that's the new money that often the smart money that bought during the stealth phase, that's the ones they're selling it to. And the problem is that these people come in and a lot of times they first buy Bitcoin. That's not always the case, especially with this most recent run up and the publicity behind like meme coins and whatnot.
Hmm.
But usually a lot of people at least start with Bitcoin, and they quickly see that the problem is they buy Bitcoin and then Bitcoin's not doing anything relative to the altcoins because all they see is they buy Bitcoin at 50 or 60K after it's already made its this major move, and then it's not doing anything, and then they see altcoins. Oh, what are these altcoins doing? Something shiny's over here, it's popping off, I want to go buy that. So then they go buy that, and then they develop this mentality of, well, I'm never going to buy Bitcoin because there's more upside potential with altcoins. And I would agree with the fact that there's more upside potential with altcoins. There's also more downside potential with altcoins when you buy them at the top. So what I try to do is I try to say, if you come in at the local top, you have to say you recognize you're coming in during a bubble and that it will come down at some point, it will deflate at some point, and that you need to start with Bitcoin because Bitcoin will protect you from the downside risk in the event that Bitcoin drops. The altcoin market will drop. I mean, it'll drop against the US dollar, but it'll also drop like, 50% or more against Bitcoin. So you need to protect your downside risk by getting Bitcoin. And then also the nice thing about Bitcoin is that you still reserve the right to make substantial gains if Bitcoin goes up. You know, so that's sort of what I try to instill in people is, hey, manage your risk. You recognize that altcoins are doing well because Bitcoin already did well. But then when Bitcoin crashes, most altcoins are going to crash against Bitcoin harder. I mean, just look at most altcoins. If you look at their altcoin Bitcoin valuation over the last 3 months, they've bled against Bitcoin. Now, in the last week or so, they've sort of come back up some, or a couple weeks. But one of the reasons is because Bitcoin is now back above the 20-week estimate. It's back above our the bull market support band or whatever. If that doesn't hold, then altcoins can continue bleeding against Bitcoin.
Hmm.
So you have to recognize that when Bitcoin's going down quickly, these altcoins are going to bleed, and so that's what usually scares people off because they FOMO everything into altcoins, and then they lose it all, and then they write off crypto for the next several years, and then they come back at the worst possible time again. And it's just like, hey, just stick with it, like for at least a couple of years, and you'll probably come out the other side, right? Like Bitcoin will very likely bail you out, and you can kind of see how these cycles operate.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree 100%. And one of the things that has frustrated me, uh, particularly with just the consumer app space, the Robinhoods, the Coinbases, the apps are kind of designed to make you FOMO into these things. You're looking at Bitcoin, it's moved, maybe up or down by a few percents, but they're always showing, this thing's up 60%, this thing's up 20%. And what I find is a lot of people are getting into crypto and they're just throwing money at these acronyms. They have no idea what they even stand for, what they actually do in the world. They're just chasing those percentage gains. And so, in a sense, there's like Bitcoin and everything else. So, Bitcoin obviously is a really great store of value. I mean, its
Right.
fundamentals are geared around that. Are there other things in this space that excite you beyond the pure market trading aspect?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people with a technical background really like Ethereum, and it's sort of because they realize the potential of Ethereum. And what the potential is you have no, I mean, you have, first of all, you can always make the argument that it could be, a lot of these things could theoretically be built on Bitcoin, right? Um, but with Ethereum, it's sort of like the backbone of crypto, like in terms of like utility, like what people are actually using it for. Now, some projects like to make up utility, but there's a lot of utility. I mean, you have decentralized finance, which is really good as long as I think the main issue with DeFi right now is there's a lot of regulatory uncertainty, and especially if you're in like the United States, which is where I am, you always have to be concerned about that, which is not as much of an issue with Bitcoin, though there's still going to be something there as well. So I would say with Ethereum, it provides the backbone, right? You not only have decentralized finance, but you also have this booming NFT space, right? You have non fungible tokens, and there are some issues I think with NFTs that are going to have to be worked out. But what's currently going on there is you have artists capitalizing on digital art, and my thinking behind NFTs is that digital art is just sort of scraping the surface of what NFTs can ultimately represent, or what it could end up being in our society. I would like to think that one day we can prove ownership of our house on the blockchain, you know, or prove ownership of various things on the blockchain, rather than having to march down to your downtown and find some piece of paper or find it online to say, hey, you signed the dotted line, you own it. It'd be nice to actually show you own it on the blockchain. So there's a couple different applications right there. And then you also have the idea of money. What is money? And I think that's currently being explored. People just create money, and they create their own ecosystem of money, and they say, you know what, we're going to mint um, these tokens, and we're going to see where it goes. Now, the problem is that you have a lot of nefarious actors, and that's where it becomes a problem, because a lot of crypto projects, I think a lot of people don't understand, because as you said, they just see a ticker on the screen, and the reason they buy that ticker is for usually one of two reasons, right? It's either because it went up a lot recently, or because it was shilled to them somewhere, and someone told them that it was worth buying. The problem is a lot of times these shills are paid shills, so the opinions that you're hearing are paid for, um, and then you sort of you don't understand exactly what it is. So Bitcoin and Ethereum, in terms of being decentralized, in my opinion, are far ahead of a lot of other projects. But that doesn't mean these other projects aren't going to fill, their own sort of niche in the asset class. So I am very excited about the technology behind some of the projects, but we have to remember that a lot of these projects, there's trade-offs between them, right? So the three main things that you look for are scalability, security, and decentralization, right? Those are the three main things, and it's sort of like the trilemma,
Hmm.
problem. Can you have all three at once? Well, you look at Ethereum, and it's super decentralized. Or it's decentralized, um, but and I'd say it's secure. But in terms of scalability, who wants to pay $100 in gas fees? Um, you look at other projects that they fix it, right? They fix it. They make it so the gas fees are small, but really, all they're doing is they're raising the block size, right? They're increasing the block limit. Because remember, like, like a good example of this, so that I'm not just talking in like uh, very nuanced, but is like the Binance Smart Chain, right? It essentially at one point was more or less just a clone of Ethereum, or part of Ethereum, and all they did at first, I mean, it's sort of migrated from that now, but the reason the fees were so low is because they increased the block size. I mean, Ethereum can do that if they wanted to. It's not like, some of the smartest people working in blockchain can't figure out how to lower the gas fees. It's just that if they were to lower the gas fees, what would happen? Well, in order to do that, they have to increase the block size, the block limit. If they increase the block limit, what happens? Well, then you have people, in order to run a node, it costs them more research, or sorry, it costs them more computational power. And if it costs them more computational power, it means less people can afford to run a node. And if less people can afford to run a node, it means that it's less decentralized. So
Hmm.
again, the technology is great, and it's currently in development, right? It's currently in development. And so all these different projects that you have, all these different altcoin projects that are not scams, like, first of all, some of them are scams, but the ones that are not scams are they're testing the market. They're saying, well, what if maybe the market doesn't care about decentralization, or maybe they don't care about security? And so a lot of these projects are just different trade-offs between a lot of them, and I think that's really cool to explore, because I mean, a lot of people say decentralization. I really like decentralization, right? I really do. But if the most recent bubble indicated anything, it's that not everyone cares, because a lot of projects were, just going crazy because of other reasons that people found valuable. So I think the technology behind crypto, there's a lot to offer, and we're currently in the part of exploring what the market values, and yeah, so that's where I think we're headed. And some projects will win out, some won't. But the underlying technology will ultimately um, determine which projects prevail and which ones don't.
It's one of the things that I was really attracted to in the space is I feel like we're all in at the ground floor of a technology revolution, and we're kind of missing the forest for the trees because our focus on it is solely the profits to be gained buying and trading. I do have to ask you, I'm really curious. You've been doing the YouTube channel now for a couple years, and it sounds like you've really made that your primary focus. You've worked to build an audience. I'm curious, like, how much time do you spend a week working on your content, and how have you been able to balance for yourself that the required sort of sensationalism or matching the algorithms on YouTube so that you get found versus I
Right.
think what you're really bringing to the market, which is the level-headed technical analysis. What has that journey been like for you?
Yeah, when I first started the YouTube channel, it was hard figuring out what path I wanted to take, because the easy path, of course, is just making sensationalist titles, and really clickbait thumbnails and whatnot. And I think I ultimately decided that it's kind of a weird thing to say, but like I feel like I ultimately decided that I would rather make my thumbnails look very plain and boring and appeal to a certain type of person, rather than appeal to the people that would like to see, like, um, other types of thumbnails and sensationalist titles. The problem with those are that at the time, when they're, and you maybe experienced this too when you first put out your video on Wyckoff distribution. At first, people are likely to say mean things, or pretend like you have no idea what you're talking about, because this person says it's going to go up like crazy, and you're saying, hey, maybe it's not. Um, so it's kind of hard, because you kind of get written off as like the bad guy who doesn't want to see crypto succeed. But what you're really trying to do is, and what I saw you try to do back in April, was you tried to protect people. You're like, hey, like, don't fall for this, don't fall for this. So that's definitely a journey, because you kind of have to figure out, and you're new in your YouTube, your if you want to call it your YouTube career, right? You're relatively new. You've exploded. You went from zero to what, 200,000 subscribers, like that, which I think is great, and you deserve it. And you have to kind of figure out, like, what do you want to be about, right? Do you want to be about, would you rather have you know, would you rather have people trust your words because you're just telling them what you see, or would you rather have people um, buy what you're selling in the sense of like, hey, someone's offered you a few $1,000s to promote something, and you have to say no to that, right? You have to keep saying no to that. So yeah, that was sort of what it was like early on, and it was a lot harder. It was a lot harder for me personally to turn those down earlier on because like I was putting so much time and effort into the YouTube channel. Um, but again, I don't have AdSense enabled. I don't have any of that stuff enabled. Um, and it was hard because you're like, well, I mean, that could buy me a new desk or something. But to this day, my desk is still made out of cardboard. Like I mean, I literally have a slab here just sitting on 3 cardboard boxes. Um, so it was really hard to turn it down early on, and they throw, I mean, to give you guys ideas so that we're fully transparent, right? They'll throw large sums of money at you. They'll offer you tens of thousands of dollars to promote an altcoin, and you just have to say no. You just have to say, I can't do that because it's worth more to the viewer to know that I can't do that, and they can trust what I say, because if you end up having your words paid for all the time, um, then how can anyone believe anything? Is That's sort of what my philosophy was. Now I don't want to say that there's certainly a generalization there that doesn't apply to everyone. I certainly don't think that everyone on YouTube taking paid promotions is bad. There's plenty of people that I watch that do their own paid promotions, and I think it's fine. Um, I think you have to disclose it for sure. And I'm not talking about crypto, to be completely honest. Like, I'm talking about other types of interests that I have that I like watching. Like I'm a pretty big in the chess world. I really like watching that stuff, and I don't fault these guys for occasionally taking a paid promotion so that they can continue playing chess, and I can watch and enjoy that. I just think you have to be careful, right? You have to be careful about what you do. You have to disclose it, and then eventually, if and again, I haven't taken any yet. I haven't taken any at all. Eventually you get to the point where it doesn't become as hard to turn them down, because you've done it so long, and you're like, well, if you were going to sell out, you would have sold out years ago at these other prices they were throwing at you back then. And if you can say no to that, it becomes a lot easier to say no. The nice thing is that your audience really, really, really trusts you, and I value that more than making a few bucks off of some of these promotions. So you kind of have to figure out what path you want to go down, and to be clear, like, I feel like both paths are reasonable, but you certainly have to be careful if you go down the other one, because you want to make sure you don't fall into the trap of shilling an altcoin because you got paid to do it, and then you just because once someone sees you do it, then you'll get offers from other projects to do it more than likely, and then you just it's a slippery slope, right? And it's like a feedback loop. You if you put out that a certain altcoin is going to 1,000x in a week, people are going to click on it, and people are more likely to watch the ads in the video, and you get paid more. So then if people do it, you're more incentivized to keep making the titles more sensationalist and more clickbait, because it's just a feedback loop, right? And so that's sort of what I struggled with early on, figuring out what direction I wanted to go. And to be completely honest, when I first started, I did entertain the idea, but I ultimately just said no. I ultimately just said no. So that's sort of what got me started, and then now it's really easy to say no to that stuff, and just put out what I think on the market. And it's kind of cool having your own audience of people that just want to hear your thoughts on the market. I think that's a really cool thing, and I know you have that now, and you're growing that. So I guess if I could offer any advice to you, which is kind of crazy considering I only started this stuff 2 years ago. It's not like I'm an expert at any of this stuff, um, but it's just like figure out what path you want to go down, and then stick to it. And um, people will remember that. People will remember those decisions that you make, and it'll be sort of who you are and how the community sees you. So yeah.
Yeah,
Hopefully that
so
answers the question.
yeah, so much good stuff there, Ben. And I mean, that's why I instantly resonated with you and your channel, and I think that's why your audience has as well. It's obvious when you're talking that you're here for their interests. I mean, I think this is something that you enjoy, so it's something that you do and do well, but it's clear where your priorities lie, and I think that is amazing, and that's really why you're one of the first people that I wanted to reach out to in the space, because I just feel that affinity with. One of the things that you also said is, both paths are reasonable, and one of the things that I'm grappling with is I had initially a pretty negative response once I realized how this market worked. Once I realized how the Wyckoff distribution was, the lines on the graph were bent by YouTube and by Twitter and by people
Hmm.
kind of pouring fuel on those emotions that we have naturally. And just the recognition that we ourselves as a crypto community are fundamentally responsible for for our own fear and greed and the amplification of it driving these cycles that end up hurting us. But at the same time, I also recognize that this space is filled with, human beings that are trying to make a living. They're trying to do something, build a channel, build, whatever it is that they're trying to build. And the system itself is geared towards producing this outcome. So the algorithms, I mean, I can tell the difference when I put a title that's got keywords in it and kind of, edging towards that sensationalism versus just, what this thing is actually about. I can see the difference in views, and
Hmm.
I think the AdSense, that, like you said, it's this self-fulfilling cycle. So what we get is a YouTube that is trying to generate this hype. We have people that are, having to say no to that and maybe not gaining a following, not making a living at this. They just end that dream and go back to doing something else. And then the other
Hmm.
side, the retail traders that are on apps like Robinhood, that are also pushing them into the FOMO and the fear of holding on. And so I guess I have a lot of empathy for everyone involved, and I don't fault any other creators out there for falling into the clickbait and the sensationalist titles, because the system itself is bending them in that direction.
Oh yeah, for
And
sure.
yeah, so it's kind of this weird puzzle where we're all looking out for each other in a certain way, but we're also in an environment that is wired to produce these outcomes.
Well, I knew a lot of. I mean, I know a lot of these guys that have and I mean we all had relatively small channels, and then they all just blew up. You know, I mean, I can say this for a fact. Every single person I've met who's a like in crypto, who's like an influencer or whatever you want to call them, they're really great people, right? I haven't met anyone that like I just absolutely despised or didn't really get along with. Like I feel like they're all really great people, and they basically they started a YouTube channel at a good time, and they figured out a business model that works for them. And I'm not going to fault them. I'm not going to fault
Mm-hmm.
them for that. And I mean, if anything, yeah, I mean, it just shows you that they're basically providing what the masses want. That's what they want, and maybe it's not what they need, but that's what they want. And yeah, I mean, it's capitalism, right? Like it's just figuring out a business model and then running with it. So yeah, I would say that. Like, I mean, I feel like all of them are really great guys and girl, like women and men. They're all really really great. Um, yeah, and I think that you're right. There's some level of truth to that. That like that distribution fate. I mean, it's not just caused by it's a social phenomenon, right? It's not just caused by a few large institutions getting together behind closed doors and saying, hey, like let's make sure we do this. But it's also caused by prices go up like crazy, and then it's just natural for us as human beings to want them to keep going up forever. And you get to that phase where it's like, all right, we dropped back down, but then we went back up. We're just going to keep going up forever. um, yeah, and I think you what you said is very much correct. And um, yeah, I mean, I feel like we kind of have to look out for one another in the sense that um, we all sort of grapple with the same things. Where, as you said, if you put out a video that is a little bit more clickbait than another one, it gets more views. And I've seen that, right? If I put out a video title called let's say it's like Bitcoin market cycle ROI, right? If I just put out that, it doesn't really do that well. It doesn't really do that well. But if I put out a video title called "The Ethereum Tsunami," because that was when I was thinking that Ethereum was going to go up against Bitcoin earlier in the year, because that's what it normally does right at the end, right? It goes up 2x in the last 2 weeks before a local top. That's what it did in 2018. That's what it did this past time. It went from like 2,200 to 4,400 in about 2 weeks. Um, and you see that, and there's a huge difference in views. Even, I mean, I feel like my titles aren't as clickbait as some of the ones I've seen, but even the distinguishing between slightly different titles, there's a huge difference between the number of views there. So yeah, it's definitely like a hard thing to navigate, because you're rewarded for doing that stuff, and you're punished for being more down to earth. So I guess it sort of shows who we are.
Do you think we can learn from this? Do you think we can change these cycles? Do you think we can, find a way to elevate and mature the space, or do you see this as just tumbling into this capitalist human nature?
Well, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, I think to some degree, I mean, just from like a first of all, from like a technical standpoint, volatility is going down. People don't want to think that it is, but I mean, again, it's one of those things where if you look at 2011, Bitcoin went up. I mean, first of all, like if we had followed what Bitcoin did in 2011 or 2013, we'd already be over $1 million by now, right? And we're not. So obviously, you can see that things have calmed down some. you know, Bitcoin is on this is a, whether I feel like whether people change or not, we are, we're not going to keep going up as much forever, right? And that's the whole idea behind like the idea of diminishing returns. You can't Bitcoin can't just 100x every 4 years for the rest of eternity. Like that doesn't make any sense, because then the market would first of all figure out what's happening, but also you have to think about market capitalization. So just from like a technical standpoint, I don't think it can go on forever, regardless. Now, do I think that we can do anything about the altcoin stuff? Well, I feel like it's not even. It's hard, because even if the people that are currently, even if the people that currently like if we just stopped making videos altogether, including myself, right? If all of us just stopped making videos and said, hey, we're no longer going to participate in this, because even though we try to warn people, there's always going to be someone who maybe misunderstands what I say, or they're gonna invest more than they can afford to lose, even if I tell them, hey guys, this is super risky time. There's always going to be another set of people that want to come in and do the same thing. Um, and you see that even today. I mean, there's so many people that are starting up YouTube channels because they see what's going on, with the people who started a few years ago, and they want to be a part of that, right? They want to have that big following. They want to, but at the same time, like there's a huge responsibility that comes with having a big following, and this is something that I didn't even think about when I had 500 subscribers. Like I could say something when I had 500 subscribers, and if what I said, didn't if I said, hey, I think that there's a good chance that X is going to happen, and then if X doesn't happen, no one cares, right? Because no one watches me. But when you have hundreds of thousands of followers, you have to be so careful what you say, because if you say something and it does not come true, they'll never let you forget it, right? They'll never let you forget it. So with that in mind, I do think that people should take, I should say influencers should take a little bit more responsibility in what they say, and myself included. Myself included. We should, always try to be as I would say conservative. I'd rather be conservative and be pleasantly surprised than promise the moon and us not make it out of orbit. Um, so I do think we probably should take on a little bit more responsibility than we are, and it's easy for people. It's easy for influencers to say, you know, um, this project is great, and I'm going to invest a lot of my money, and then they show you that it's going to go up a lot, but then they just get out of it by saying, oh, do your own research, right? Be responsible for your own stuff. But I would say it's true. Everyone should do their own research. Everyone should be responsible for their own stuff. But influencers who have hundreds of thousands of subscribers also should be responsible for what they say, because people look up to them. People look up to them, and they hear these words, and no matter what you say, there's going to be people that go do something just because you did it, even if you tell them not to. Like if I said, hey, I'm going to eat chocolate ice cream for lunch or something, and said, hey, you shouldn't do this because it's not healthy for you, there's still going to be someone out there that goes and do it. So you have to be really, really careful about what you say. Do I think that we can change it? I would say I'm fairly pessimistic about that, because there's always going to be there's always going to be a new group of people that want to come and capitalize on that. I think the main thing that will ultimately change will just be that the asset class as a whole is going to mature.
Hmm.
um, and over the years, I would assume that volatility will ultimately reduce. But with that said, I mean I could see some type of volatility going on for a couple decades, right? If you plot out, this is a very dubious plot and very dubious extrapolation, as we say. But if you plot out like the annualized volatility of Bitcoin, or just say, let's say you look at like the difference between the minimum and maximum price of Bitcoin in a given year, and you plot it out, it's generally decreasing. It's not decreasing monotonically, but if you were to extrapolate it, it's going to take a couple decades before the difference between the minimum and maximum price of Bitcoin might be no more than say 10-15%. It's going to take a couple decades to get to that point. So I don't see it changing anytime soon with crypto. But in a couple decades, I think at some point over the next say 10 to 20 years, the underlying technology behind the projects will become more concrete as it makes its way into our society. Like, what are people actually using? What are major companies building on? You know, what projects are they utilizing? And at some point, it's not clear yet because it's so much just speculation and whatnot. But at some point, we're going to get to the phase where people look at the market and they say, well, Bitcoin, we got every institution in the world wants to own Bitcoin. So that's a good one to have, right? It seems like a lot of people feel the same thing about Ethereum, and people are building a lot on Ethereum. And then you're going to have all these altcoin projects, and it's just going to be like, well, some are going to be used and some are not. And I think at some point the market's going to wise up to that, and and not just believe every single ICO promotion. Because again, to create an ERC20, a middle schooler could do it, right? It's not hard. You just go create the contract, you launch your WordPress site, and then you pretend like it's the best thing. It's really easy to do. The problem is, I thought back in 2017, if I'm being completely honest, I thought back in 2017, I was like, you know what? This ICO boom has been crazy. I can't wait till the next market cycle when people have learned their lesson, and they're not going to fall for this stuff. And here we are a few years later, and it's even worse. It's actually worse than it was back then, because now instead of having ICOs that pretend to be to pretend to have value, you instead have just nothing but meme coins that admit they have no value other than the idea that they're a meme, right? And so I would argue that it's even worse than it was back then, because now you have developers that are just saying, hey, I can create an ERC20, make it some cute name, and appeal to millennials or whatnot. And even if I own 50% of the supply, as long as it has a cute picture in front of it, people are going to come buy it. And
Mhm.
so it's even worse. I would say it's even worse than it was in 2017. So, I would like to believe that the next time we see a boom in the crypto space, uh, we won't have that. But my underlying feelings are that it's probably going to be the same for a little while, and that people will keep falling for the same tricks. And maybe what ultimately will happen is, as much as some people might not like it, is regulation. That will probably be something that will
Hmm.
temper the crypto market, and make it so that people can't just launch ICOs anytime they want, and collect money and then just disappear. And that's probably, regulation is probably one of the things that'll help deal with that,
Hmm.
for better or for worse, right? I mean, it to some degree it stifles innovation, because it's harder to just launch your own project. To the other degree, as they say, right, it protects investors. A lot of investors don't want to be protected, right? We want to be protected against the Fed just printing money, and so Bitcoin is our solution. Um, but yeah, that's probably, regulation is probably one thing that'll help with that.
Yeah, it's funny because I've noticed multiple times where something happens, whether it's a market cycle top in 2017, 2018, and people like, you would think they learned their lesson, but then as soon as things turn green again, it's completely forgotten. And even on short-term cycles, I've seen that so much, even in my like friends and community, the mental switch between dismal, panic, and then just absolute like falling into everything again. So I think you're right that there's not much that can really be done to have people learn these lessons when there's this opportunity to 10x 100x their money. It doesn't matter what dog picture
Mhm.
is on the coin. It just represents some escape hatch from, maybe it's their job, maybe it's not saving for retirement, and this is the way they're going to make it all work is through crypto. But it's so easy to just go from the extreme red to the extreme green and greed and forget the lessons that we just learned. So with the regulation, I'm curious your take on what that actually means for the market. Do I mean, you say, you're kind of saying there's some positives that you see. You're also a fan of decentralization. So what would you predict, dubious prediction, is actually going to happen here, and how is it going to affect you, me, and everyone else that's currently engaging in the market the way that we do?
Yeah, I definitely think there's good things about it and bad things. Um, some of the good things, to get that out of the way, um, are we all want institutions, right? Everyone loves the idea of institutions buying Bitcoin. Everyone, hey, if institutions are buying, then I'm buying, right? That's the general thing. The problem is that, hey, institutions lose money all the time. I mean, like, I think some people think that institutions are always smart money. That's not true. In fact, I know a lot of people that that work at these big investment banks, and sometimes and whatnot. And a lot of times, they'll just make the decision one day, hey, we're gonna have Bitcoin on the books. They don't necessarily try to time the bottom, right? They just say, hey, we want Bitcoin, just go buy $100 million worth of Bitcoin and then put it on the books, right? That's the idea. That doesn't mean that it's not going to be worth 50 million the next year. It just means that that's sort of where they're coming from. But I would say that institutions, in order for us to keep going up our curves on Bitcoin price discovery and whatnot, and to continue on, we need institutions, and institutions are already coming in. But I feel like some type of regulation, and better understanding of how does how do we view Bitcoin, that would probably encourage more institutions, right, to come in. And like right now, I'm sure there's a ton of institutions that buy Bitcoin. Like I know a lot of people. I know like a lot of people that work for relatively small companies that they have Bitcoin on their books, and a lot of these companies have nothing to do with crypto, right? Like they're just like small companies that just want to have crypto on the books. But there's still a lot of really large institutions that, as far as we know, don't have crypto, right? I mean, it's always possible that they're some of them do, and we just don't know it yet. But a lot of the ones, they don't. But it could be because they don't really know like what types of regulations are coming for it, and I think some regulations would provide clarity on what the U.S. government, since I mean I'm in the U.S., like what the government and governments everywhere, right? What it is, and how do we view Bitcoin, right? How do we view it? How do we view Ethereum? How do we view altcoins? Like, are they securities? Are they not? Um, and I think that type of regulation would be a good thing for institutions. Now, the bad parts from these regulations are that it can stifle innovation. And if you think about everything that has been innovated over the last decade, because people could just start up their own project. Like, think about all the things we've discovered because people had that freedom to just go experiment with something. They had the freedom to go experiment with money, go print something and see what the market values it at, right? Go print it and see how the market values it. There's a big part of me that really
Mm.
likes the idea of letting the market decide. Um, and that is one of the biggest reasons why you always have to be careful in some of these these new altcoin startups and whatnot, because we don't know ultimately what's going to happen. Bitcoin, I had Michael Saylor on my show a couple months ago, and one of the things he said was, and he's true, is that Bitcoin is probably going to be, in terms of regulation, it probably has the most going for it. Because with Ethereum, you have to contend with all these things. Like, how do you treat DeFi? How do you treat that? Do the people creating these platforms, do all of them have to KYC their customers? Like, they have to KYC every single transaction? Um, and then with the most recent bill that's making its way through Congress, and they've gone back and forth on the wording on it. Do validators have to KYC every single person that stakes with them? This this affects me, right? This affects me. I run validators. I run a few different validators, and we have, there's over $100 million on these validators that are earning interest, and if they say, hey, Ben, you have to KYC all this stuff. Like, you have to make sure you know every single person that is earning interest on your validator, then I have to shut them down. Like, I mean, it's just there's some parts of these regulations that just don't make sense. I mean, I believe that everyone should pay their taxes. Like, that's really, really important that you pay your taxes. But to expect validators to be responsible for providing like that information to the government, it just seems like it's not. It's going to really stifle innovation in the United States if that happens, and it's going to send a lot of that overseas, and it's not going to be good, right? And even the companies that go overseas, if they deal with U.S. customers, they can't, right? They have to get that information. It's sort of like exchanges. A lot of exchanges won't even let you use their exchange if you live in the United States. Like, think about, I mean, there's been a number of exchanges I've wanted to use in the past, and I couldn't because of where I live. And the reason is because they don't want to deal with the United States, right? They'd say, hey, we'd rather just deal with these international, these people not in the United States than have to deal with the regulation going on in the United States. So the problem is there's a fine line between, regulating it in a way that makes sense for institutions to come in to provide some clarity there so they understand, like, okay, how do people view this? What is it? But then on the other side, if you overregulate it or put stuff in there that just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because it's being, think about it. Like, I mean, everyone in the Senate, I really wish I put out this tweet the other day. Like, can we go around and ask every senator, what is Bitcoin, right? Like, what is it, and what is Ethereum? What are you telling people that they have to KYC? Do you know what a validator is, right? Do you know these things? If you don't even know these things, then why are you deciding what should happen? And that's a huge problem because you have these people, they don't even understand what it is, and they're deciding, they're killing it. They're trying to kill the industry, and they don't even know what it is. So that's an issue, and that is something that I'm following very, very closely because it directly affects me. And I'm someone who doesn't really follow the. I mean, I follow the news, but I don't report on the news. But I have to follow this because, depending on what happens, could directly affect what I'm doing, and this would affect a lot of people. It also protocol developers. This is another issue that the bill. And the protocol developers weren't even in the initial revision because, right, at first it was just like proof of work, like Bitcoin, and then people who have the hardware wallets and whatnot, and then they added proof of stake, so that they added this nuance that then protected validators, but then it doesn't protect protocol developers. So if it doesn't protect protocol developers and people can't develop, then you're essentially making it so the United States is going to get very far behind other countries in terms of innovation in the crypto space. And I don't really think that makes a whole lot of sense. If anything, the U.S. government should really like crypto because it represents a way for them to make a lot of money via taxes. Now, why do they need to make money via taxes when they can just print a few $1 trillion? It's beyond me, right? It's beyond me. Like, why do you say you need to earn, 40 billion over the next few years from crypto taxes to fund this bill if you're just going to go print $3 trillion tomorrow? Like, it's sort of like what's a few $1 trillion among friends, like, excuse. But I look at China, they banned miners recently. Was that smart? I don't think that's smart at all for them to do that. Is it good for Bitcoin? I mean, to some degree, considering how centralized some of these operations were, it's probably not necessarily a bad thing. So but for China, I feel like it's probably a bad thing. So I guess with all this regulation stuff and getting back to the question and whatnot, yeah, like I do think that some level is good to get institutions on board, which I believe is the volume we need to continue running up our curve. Um, but I would like for these regulations to be made by people who actually
Mm.
understand what crypto is, so that it can be regulated in a way that um, you know actually makes sense and doesn't completely kill the market.
Yeah. I have to scratch my head and wonder, are these bills and the actual legislation written out of ignorance, or do they actually serve someone else's intent, and this is an intentional kind of ploy to prop up something else that isn't Bitcoin or isn't one of the currently used or traded cryptos. And that's
Right,
one of
like
the things I
federally,
was,
yeah,
yeah,
like
I
if
was
they
thinking.
backed like a federally backed currency or something.
I mean, I was thinking earlier this year with, Dogecoin exploding as it did. I mean, it had, personally for me, just like disaster written all over it. And I could just see it as like a beautiful narrative to lead into regulation and the need for the government to step in and protect everybody. And there was the hack a couple days ago, like as these bills are going through, the Senate, with the 600 million that was hacked on the Poly network, things like that. And I'm just like, how do all of these things just line up to build this narrative that allows whatever this regulation, you know, yeah, I feel like there's something more behind it. I just don't really know whose interest it serves.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean that's obviously a good question to ask. Who benefits from this?
mhm.
Like who benefits from it? Because there probably is someone that benefits from it, and it's also hard to imagine that they didn't know what they were doing. Um, like they have all these resources. But I mean, I don't know. Like it's really hard to say. But yeah, I mean, 600 million gets hacked in a one of these DeFi platforms, and you have people shilling. If you have people shilling these meme coins and they can actually affect the market, that's a glaring concern for for like the SEC or for whoever that under regulations. Like they're gonna come out with the excuse that they're gonna protect investors, whether we want to be protected or not, right? That's what they're gonna say. um, yeah,
and
I
I'm
mean
and
it's
I'm
a big
yeah,
concern.
I'm sure the senators, they don't know anything about technology, and they probably don't need to, right? Because I would assume that the United States government has people like you that they are going to and saying, "Hey, help us figure this stuff out." And the
Right.
actual laws that get written are not just kind of being casually constructed. I feel like there's an agenda
Yeah.
that's probably being pushed forward. We're just not really able to see it yet. But
Yeah, like
so
I doubt the U.S. senators themselves went and did the research on crypto
I,
to write that bill.
So I know we only have a few minutes left, and I'm just,
Yeah.
I want to dig a little bit deeper into, you as a person. You're showing up on YouTube every day. You're pouring out your heart and your knowledge. What are you doing when you're not staring at charts? Or are you always staring at charts? Like, crypto brought you here to fill something in your life, but you know what really drives you? What outside of this space are you trying to do in the world?
Yeah, so up until January, I was still working at a lab, and last month, as I mentioned, I just had a paper published last month um, on radiation damage in magnesia, MGO, using molecular dynamics simulations, and so that's something. And then also, I have 3 kids. I'm married. I've been married since 2013. So we have a lot of stuff going on when I'm not staring at the charts. Although I do stare at the charts
I
a
was gonna
decent amount.
ask, what does your wife think of the introduction of crypto into your life?
Yeah, I mean she a couple weeks ago I heard her say that Bitcoin is the future, and I was like, whoa, whoa.
Wow.
Um, she doesn't normally say that type of stuff. Yeah, I mean like she doesn't really dabble in it herself. Um, uh, but she also recognizes that like we're doing better than we were because we're in crypto.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I think she likes it from, in the sense that she recognizes that it's probably going to ultimately grow in value over the years, um, and whatnot. Yeah, I mean, I think like I feel like a lot of people who are married can relate, in the sense that, one person a lot of times is more interested in crypto than the other person, and so I'm sure there's a lot of spouses out there, or a lot of people out there that can relate to, them being interested in crypto, but their spouse not necessarily relating. And I will say, one way you can get your spouse a little bit more on board with crypto is to actually take profits occasionally. Because otherwise, if you think about it, like from their perspective, all it is this is like black box that you throw money into, and you never get that money back, right? It just stays in the cryptoverse, and they never see it again, right? They never see it again. But the person that puts money into crypto and then says, like, a few months later, a year or two later, hey, I put in $1,000, and now that $1,000 is worth $10,000, and I want you to know that I just took out $4,000 in profits, and we're going to use that to, go on this vacation, or we're going to use that to pay our rent for the next few months, and then I'm going to keep the other money in. Then they start to get more on board with it, right? But if you only ever use it to throw money into meme coins and then go to zero, yeah, who can blame them for not liking it?
Totally. Yeah, it gets back to the utility, right? I mean, if these things are just carrying around in your pocket on your Coinbase and you're obsessively looking at them, but you're not taking your spouse out to dinner or taking your kids on a trip or like using it to enrich your life, then what's the point, right?
Right. Yeah. We only get one life, and your kids only grow up one time, so make sure you enjoy it, and make sure you should invest, right? You should always be investing and whatnot, but you also need to live your life, right? You can't just not live your life because you want to make sure you're as rich as you possibly can be by the time you're 75. You also want to live and enjoy your life when you're young as well. At the same time, you need to be, I mean, I say that as I do have a cardboard desk, right? Like, I mean, I could upgrade my setup, but you really do need to enjoy life as well, and not just only dream about whatever the next 10x is, right? The way I look at crypto, from like a money management standpoint, I kind of treat it like a secondary source of income, right? I buy when the risk is low, I take profits when the risk is high. I don't worry about what the memes say about, oh, you don't have diamond hands, right? You just hodl forever. I don't care about this stuff, right? Just buy when the risk is low, take profits when the risk is high, and you're just going to keep making money. And you know what? Maybe you don't make as much money as some people who have a crystal ball and buy the exact bottom and sell the exact top, but you will make money, and you'll probably be happier because you're not, you saw, hey, like, I invested, I made this money, and now my life's better because of it. I think that's probably a good thing to consider.
You're a smart guy. You're living a life. You've got kids. You've got all of these, places in your life that you put value. What are the things that you stay up at night wondering about?
I mean, sometimes at night, to be completely honest, like I because I'll be very drained from the day, a lot of times because of, just staring at charts and whatnot, and then being with the kids. So sometimes, I mean, it might just be browsing Reddit, for a little bit, and then seeing kind of what people are talking about. Um, yeah, I mean, I think I do generally follow, like, politics and stuff, and try to figure out, like, what's going on in the world, not just U.S. politics, but just like world politics. I'm very interested in like what's going on in different places of the world. Like, um, I've traveled some. Yeah, a while back, I actually went to Uganda, for a little while, and was there, and I saw um, how bad off it is, like, how bad off people are over there. It's like a completely different world, and they don't even have the opportunities that we have. Like, it's easy to tell people, well, you should invest. I mean, a lot of these people don't even have, they're more worried about if they have water,
Hmm.
not if they have money to invest in crypto. So, there's definitely more these otherworldly things that I do think about. I also really like physics because I studied physics in undergrad. So I also like thinking about like the universe. And some of the times in my videos I'll talk about like parallel universes and like the multiverse. And I'll say, like yes, maybe there's like one universe in our multiverse where Bitcoin goes to $500,000 next month, but there's in 99.99% of the universes that theoretically it exists, it doesn't do that.
Yeah. So
So I
really what
like
you're
kind of
doing
going,
every day is you're just figuring out which of the multiverses we're in. That's what reading the
yeah,
chart
I
shows.
try to, yeah. What is the most probable path that we take? And I really like the universe and kind of studying that, like studying, technology wise, like where are we? Obviously, we have a long way to go, but I like I sometimes check in on where Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 are, like how far out in the solar system they are, that kind of stuff. And also I like occasionally looking at the like the nice images of the solar system. Like there's like some subreddits where you have amateur photographers and whatnot who are taking really great pictures of like the Milky Way. I really like that stuff as well.
Yeah, totally. There's something that happens when you look at like a Hubble Space Telescope picture and see galaxies uncountable in front of you that
Yeah,
makes the price of Bitcoin seem a little less. Uh,
yeah. Was remember when that spacecraft it got out to like Pluto or something and it looked back and
hmm
all you could see was one pixel on the screen. It was like zoomed into like that was the Earth, and it was like so every problem we've ever had in our entire existence is literally like a pixel on a screen on a spaceship leaving our solar system, which is at the outskirts of the Milky Way, right? We're not even in an important part of the Milky Way. We're not even near the middle. Like we're not near like these big super clusters. Like we're like on the on
the backwoods.
yeah, we're like in the backwoods. So we're not anywhere. It's like we're yeah. It just puts things into perspective. And then you think about like the Milky Way, and I mean, okay, there's Andromeda, but like how far is these super clusters and whatnot of other galaxies, and to think about how tiny our problems are compared to what's potentially out there.
That's probably a great note to end on because when you get to that scale, I mean, it keeps coming for me. Like I get into the charts, I get into Bitcoin, I get wrapped up in crypto. It's exciting. And then I remember like where we actually are, how short our time is, how silly these problems are. And it makes me realize that I've got kids that are waiting to go play in the sun. So,
Yeah, hey,
that,
here's a good quote. Too late to explore the Earth, too
hmm,
early to explore the universe, born just in time to explore the cryptoverse.
there you go. Awesome. All right, Ben. Well, I appreciate your time so much and everything you do. I've learned a ton from you, and I know a lot of other people have as well. So, yeah, thanks for teaching and teaching me, and hope we get to stay in touch.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Awesome. All right, cheers.